our flock and we're hatching our chicks, we always want to try to hatch more than what we think we'll need to replenish our own flock. And that just gives us the ability to select the best birds to go forward with. And that's how we continue to improve and make ourselves a good, well-bred, healthy flock. It's by constantly picking out the top performers and keeping those back for ourselves. So I guess before we get into the actual how I tackle this little job, we'll talk about the why and the when. So why we do the selecting, well, raising birds, as you probably all know, is a lot of work. It's a lot of labor. It takes a lot of money to feed them all. They take a lot of space as they're growing out. And we don't want to crowd our chicks. We want to give them lots of space so they do well and have every ability to reach their full potential. So that's why we like to reduce the ones we're not going to keep for ourselves and remove those from the flock, which brings us to the term of cull. When we talk about culling, a lot of people just use it interchangeably with kill, not necessarily so. It just means you're removing those birds that don't have value to you in your breeding program. So, you know, whether the pullets you're taking out could be sold to somebody else for their backyard flock, or maybe into your own layer flock. You might mark the roosters or put them in a separate area, a grow-out pen, and use them for meat purposes. Whatever you decide to do that fits your life and your goals. So that's, when I'm talking about culling, that's what I'm referring to, just removing those birds that aren't useful to you. So. And when? So really the selection process starts right from hatch. You're always going through, you're always watching your birds as they grow. You're always removing those ones with the obvious defects, the ones that are showing weaknesses, you know, maybe they're just not performing well, they're not thriving. Those are ones that are not going to be useful for breeding. So you want to take those out whenever you see them. And then I guess this age is when I start doing sort of my first round of more intense selection. That's where I'm starting to see that there's definite males and females. When this group here is about 9 to 12 weeks old, and they're all blue Phocians. So I've separated down from all of this year's chicks. I've separated them into breed groups, and then further into variety, which is the color. And then I separated them into males and females. And I'll do each of those groups separately. You always want to be comparing apples to apples, and that allows you to not feel overwhelmed with this huge group of chicks and thinking, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. So I find the more you can narrow it down into smaller groups of birds, the easier your job will be. Brings me to this. This is an old standard from 2010. I've got 3 or 4 of these at home, so of different years. This is your Bible. This tells you everything you need to know when you're selecting your keepers or deciding which ones aren't going to fit your breeding program. It's really important to read all the information, and I'm not going to dive into that right now because Callum is doing a little talk on this a little bit later, and he will be diving in a little deeper into the standard of perfection and talking about all those things that you need to know. So for our purposes right now, just know that this has all the information for all the APA approved breeds, and this is what you need to refer to. It's your guide when you're doing your selections. So as I was saying, some things that you're going to notice in your birds, some are genetic defects, and those are definitely things that you don't want to breed from. Others are environmental or behavior. some could be either or. So genetic things are like a crooked beak. You might see a chick hatch with a crossed beak. You don't want to keep that. It's genetic. It will be passed down to the offspring. They're not good breeders. Wry tail. If you notice one of your chicks has a tail that goes off to one side and stays there, genetic. The number of toes. Some breeds are supposed to have more toes than other breeds. So you have to know your breed standards again. Your comb type. So sometimes you won't see a perfect comb, but it's still the correct type of comb for the breed. So it's not a disqualification. It's just, you know, a little thing that you probably won't want to call for at this young age. So let them grow up a little bit more before you start getting into the finer details. Things that could change. So things that you might start to notice now, but don't remove them from your breeding program yet at this age, because they could change. Split wing. I'll grab one here. Gap. And you can see a little bit of a gap between the primaries here. And this is not going to concern me, because the last feather to grow in, the axial feather, is going to fill that gap. So she's just a bit young right now. So I don't want to throw her out of my breeding program for something that is going to change as she gets a little bit bigger. So I think what I'm trying to say is just don't be too harsh and picky too early, because you can end up making mistakes. A couple different age groups in here. So I'm not going to be selecting on their size or weight at this moment, because you have to understand that some are just older than others. But there's plenty other things that we can look at as we start going through the group. And what I like to do is kind of roughly divide them into two pens. The ones I'm thinking I'm going to keep longer, and the ones that I might not want to keep longer. At this point though, it's just rough. It's not a hard yes or a hard no. I want to make sure that I have lots of time to change my mind and see where I land with how many pullets I end up with, and I might have to do some reshuffling as I figure out what I've got to work with. I've managed to reduce by 3, which is not maybe as many as I'd like. So I could go through and do a little bit more closer look at what's left here and make some more selections on these. But it is very early, and I would want to make sure that I'm keeping enough and growing them out that I've got room to make further selections later. There's still a lot of things that can change before they're fully mature. So things like the wing carriage, the feather quality after their final molt, and the behaviors. We don't always realize that behaviors can definitely also be genetic. Things like feather picking, egg eating, you don't want those things in your flock, and they can absolutely be carried forward to the young ones. I should mention too, this is just a small sample of my blue Cochin pullets. I have lots more at home that are older that I've already selected through, so I'm not pinning all my hopes on 5 birds. I want to have at least double that number. right now. So that's how we keep building our flock into a really healthy, vigorous, well-bred flock that we're going to be happy with.